They're not waiting for the right moment, the perfect moment. So, the habits of top producers in sales and the habits of top producers in leadership, I'm going to start with leadership and then work into sales. So, top producers in leadership have expanded thinking. I'm wearing my trademark, the acorn brain, if you can see that. I hope you can see it. Let me see if I can get this. There we go. The acorn brain. And what I talk about is small minded thinking. Now, salespeople can learn to manage their mind as well. And leaders, it's really important to learn to manage your mind. Don't let the machine run you, as George Ivanovich Gurdjieff used to say in the early 1900s. Rainer Maria Rilke in the 1800s called that voice the little hooligan. And he would ask people, will you let that little hooligan run you, or will you run it? And it's fascinating how many people believe they're thinking. If you think about today's society, we're even led by a bunch of people that are doing this all the time, right? I don't take sides because both sides are wrong. And when we make people wrong, it's because that little voice is so strong. It wants us to be right. It's small minded thinking. My passion and purpose in life is to raise the consciousness of humanity one person at a time, and to raise the consciousness in companies one CEO at a time. And I can tell you, I've met many people who have very small minded thinking and they're in leadership roles. And the minute we work on in coaching, expanding some of those thoughts, not to believe they're thinking, to become more open minded, to have a broader dialogue. A dialogue is defined as a jointly created reality. A monologue is the story we tell ourselves, right? The story one tells oneself. And that's what most people get stuck in, the story they tell themselves. My new book is called No BS Coaching. Wake up from the story you tell yourself. And when I'm working with people, the first thing I listen for is the story they tell themselves. The theys, the sales department, the customer service team, the IT department, whatever department it is that you have a complaint about, it belongs with that department. I call it a complaint with a request. Meaning that if it's rolling around in your head, that's the indicator that you actually have to speak about it. You have to bring it up. And it doesn't mean that you have to be right. Because that voice, that little small minded voice that wants you to be right all the time, is making others wrong. And it's not conducive to healthy leadership, especially if you're leading a sales team. It's fascinating how many companies that I've gone into, and there's departments that have complained about the sales team. Oh, the sales team isn't working. And then sometimes even leadership has complaints about individuals. Maybe they worked with them once and they didn't really appreciate that day. Maybe the rep wasn't on their game. And then what happens is they cast that person through that one experience and make a judgment. And that's the little voice that I call the acorn brain. Now, William Ury, Marshall Goldsmith, Red Hawk, they all talk about it in their books. William Ury has a new book, Getting to Yes with Yourself. And he talks about the power of managing that mind. Shirzad Chamine has a book called Positive Intelligence. And he has a PQ program called the PQ Coach. I recently got certified in it. Actually, it was January of this year because I find how helpful it is for my clients. So I provide it and include it in my coaching. And what it does is it takes people to the Neuro-gym. Now, you don't need the PQ coach program for that. You can do it yourself. Going to the Neuro-gym is actually no different than going to the physical gym, except the pain is different. So when you first go to the physical gym, if you haven't been in a while, you notice a pain somewhere, your arms, your shoulders, your legs. In the brain, when you start to manage your brain, what you'll notice is the brain will resist it. The story that you tell yourself will even get stronger. In fact, the brain will say, you don't need to go to the Neuro-gym. You don't need this. Everything you believe is true. For leaders, it's especially important to question those thoughts. And it's not that you won't sometimes be right. It's just that it could be your right and their right. It could be both. Dr. James Doty, in his book Mind Magic, is another fascinating book about learning to manage the mind. Now, he's a neurosurgeon and was fascinated by the brain doing surgery, how people recovered, how they rebuilt some of their activities when he did surgeries on the mind, on the brain. So he wanted to see how it all worked, and he did a lot of research, much like a neuro researcher, a neuroscientist. And he breaks it down in a very simple way. The beginning of the book tells about all the different regions of the brain and what they do. So if you're a scientist or a medical doctor, you're going to enjoy that part of the book. Hopefully you'll enjoy the second part of the book, which is where, to me, is fascinating. He becomes a metaphysician as well. And what he talks about is he makes it very simple, and I'll share it here. Picture the brain, and picture 10% of it is what you use consciously every day to operate in life. The remaining 90%, he says, is divided into two. The unconscious, which for some of us grows their hair and nails, waters the eyes, replaces skin cells, all the things that you don't have to think about, right? The functions of blood circulating and the heart pumping, all the stuff you don't think about. The remaining half, or 45% of the brain, is the subconscious. And he says, think of the subconscious this way. Two parts, a filing system and a bloodhound. Whatever we put in the filing system, the bloodhound immediately runs out to gather evidence to prove it's true, despite any evidence to the contrary. That's like if you gave the bloodhound my shirt and said, find Steve Lentini, the bloodhound would only pick up the scent that matched the scent on my shirt. It would disregard anything else. That's how our brain works. And for leaders, that once you realize that, you become more careful about managing what you put into the file system. And what I'm talking about is having an open mind. Especially critical for CEOs, because you're modeling a behavior that everyone else follows in the company. You're setting a standard. And if you're always gathering evidence to prove you're right and everybody else is wrong, or you're gathering evidence about a certain person who you think is not a loyal teammate, it could be that they have ideas that push against your own. They might be good ideas. Consider this. Shirzad Shamin says, consider that at least 10% of what anybody says could be correct. And that in a meeting, especially for leaders, it would be healthier to say, I hear what you're saying, and I agree with this part, and here's my thought about that as well, so that you add to it by saying and not but or however. Everything that follows but and however is more important than what precedes those two words. Start to listen to people that say but and however, and you will know that what follows those two words is more important to that speaker, to that person. It's not inclusive. And when I say inclusive, it's about being open to other people's ideas. And of course, I don't have to give you specific examples about where our leadership today is one side or the other. And then they expect the general population to behave differently. You should all behave civilly. Now, we don't, and you should. It's the same thing for leaders when you start gathering evidence to prove something's true because you want to be right. And that voice, by the way, may be in your subconscious that you want to be right. You may not recognize that you're just trying to make yourself right. And you're forgetting that being right makes so many others wrong. So coaching and training doesn't save anybody's job, by the way. It's coaching with training that helps people, because what I do as a coach and what any coach is doing is getting people to question their own thinking, whether they call it the acorn brain like I do or not. And when I call it the acorn brain, what I'm working with people to do is expand their thinking, that with any situation, there's limitless possibilities. There isn't a small, tiny needle threading the needle with one or two ideas. There's limitless possibilities. The other place that leaders get stuck sometimes when it's a big task or a big vision, the leaders that I've coached over the years often get stuck in how. How is it going to happen? How is not your job in a universe? Now, for some people, that may be woo-woo, but it's not woo-woo, actually. Even physicists are beginning to prove that the observer of an experiment affects the results. Meaning, in super collider experiments at Luzerne, they were conducting experiments on particles, atomic particles. And in different experiments, they would notice the same particles would act differently. And at some point, they realized, I don't know when, but you can Google this and read it, that they realized there were other people, new people in the experiments, and that the new people were impacting the results, the observer. And that's what I want people to come to, that I work with, is to become the observer of their thinking. Marshall Goldsmith talks about it. Dr. Srikumar Rao talks about it. Dr. Roland Alexander talks about it. James Doty, Red Hawk. What they talk about is notice where you're triggered and who triggers you. Then, instead of have it roll around in your mind and making people wrong over it and gathering evidence to prove it's true, despite evidence to the contrary, which, by the way, scientists call that confirmation bias, they observe and notice who and what is triggering them, and then they're looking for the gift or the lesson in it so that they might respond differently instead of reacting. And I hyphenate reacting when I work with people or if I'm writing something. And the reason I hyphenate it is because reacting is something previously learned. It's from your past. Now, Joe Dispenza and other neuroscientists And researchers have concluded this recently, and that may change, but let me share it with you. Everything that we experience emotionally until the age of 35 is filed in our subconscious. And the subconscious takes over when similar events occur. So what it says is, oh, we know how you react when you get in long lines, when you get stuck in traffic, when somebody cuts you off, when someone at work starts to act like this. And it just puts you in reactive mode. Now the machine, or the little hooligan, or the acorn brain is running you. And we live in something, I keep this on my desk and I give it to clients. This is the globe painted on a marble to remind me and to the people I give it to, my clients, that we live in something limitless, infinite. As much as we think we have figured it out, we're still probably as far away as the Incas and the Aztecs were when they were sacrificing princesses and babies to satisfy the gods. Now, thankfully, it's a lot different today. We live in something we truly don't understand. And what you put into your mind has power. So, as a leader, I'll give you some tips. You want to be thinking the best possible scenario and picturing it for your people. You want to picture them winning. You want to picture them in your mind as loyal, productive, healthy, wanting the company to win. Let go of how, because you can't control others. You have to detach from outcomes in the universe. Outcomes are not your job. Your job is changing how you respond. Right? When you change, things change. Now you've heard that from many different speakers. I have a quote that says, if you don't like your experience of the world, change how the world is experiencing you. And it's fascinating how many people, as I lay out in this book, tell themselves a story. And then they go off gathering evidence to prove it's true. Self-limiting beliefs. Then self-limiting beliefs in leaders, people see it. It actually becomes a self-limiting belief for their teams. Many leaders will tell people who want to try something new in the company, stay in your lane. Why not let them try it? And if they win, imagine the productivity and the feeling of that employee, and they've brought you something new. Maybe it would work. But if it didn't work, so what? You tried something new, and you'd be teaching people to take a risk, to venture out. So leaders have a responsibility to expand their small-minded thinking, that acorn, which, by the way, I place it in the amygdala, which is where we learned fear, flight, freeze. We learned these things in caveman times because we didn't want a pterodactyl catching us when we went out to pick up dinner. We needed it. Today, we don't need it as often. Are there times where we should pay attention to fear? Yeah. Mostly, though, we live in something that's expanded far beyond anybody's imagination, even in the early 1900s and especially the 1800s. But if you think about our progress since 1900 as a society, technology has advanced far beyond our own capability to even imagine it. And that will continue. And the same laws apply to your team. If you think and picture them in limitless ways. And if not, if you're a small minded thinker, if you're stuck in your head about shareholders, the board, the team members, some of the officers in your team, whatever it is, it's BS. Now, parts of it may be true, but a lot of it isn't. I'll challenge you right now to consider where you're telling yourself a story. Maybe it's about a mate or a child or a relative or a parent. Einstein said the basic question was, is the universe a friendly place or not? I like to say, is life for us? Is the universe for us or not? And I think the expanded thinking and those people that embrace it learn to find the gift and embrace life as guiding them. Especially, I'm going to give you another tip here, another clue. When things are difficult and challenging, it's actually life pushing you to change, urging you to respond in a new way, see things differently. Now, seeing things differently might be, instead of complaining about how things are happening in your life, looking at your responsibility in them. Now, victim thinking is very popular, and we even have government wanting to protect everybody from everything. And so it's a big story being a victim. And most people love the story. They tell it in the lunchroom, Friday nights, they tell it at home when they get home. Oh, honey, wait till you hear what the boss did to me. And the idea that these things are happening for you is very foreign to the subconscious. That little voice wants you to believe the story. It's not healthy because you're not accepting your role in creating it, that it's there for some reason. Having responsibility in what occurs means you have power. So here's something that applies to both salespeople and leaders and everyone in all walks of life. When you're telling a victim story, you created it. You have a role in it. And most people are afraid of accepting responsibility. They'd rather have the story because they're afraid of their power to create. They'd rather be a victim and sink into that woe is me story. Everything I touch turns to mess. I'm lonely. Oh, if you only knew what my parents did to me. If you only knew what the boss did to me or the company did to me. People that come into my coaching, the first thing I have them do is write the story of their complaints. I listen to it and I say, would you do me a favor and write that down? And all the names you just said and everywhere you said they, would you write that story down? And they do. They write the story down. Then I ask them at the end to read it aloud. And they read it aloud, and their brain is comfortable with it because there's a lot of theys and names and situations that happen to them. And then I ask them to change all the theys, all the names, all the stories that remove their power, where they're the victim, and put in the word I, instead of a name or a they, or what happened to them in traffic when they were screaming and shouting over something they can't control. Put in I. I was an idiot, not the other driver. I got myself fired. I didn't appreciate the gift of my parents doing this and that to me. And for the people that get it, I've had clients that only read it a third of the way and stopped and said, I get it. It's all me. Now, the fascinating thing about it is it lasts for a while. Without coaching, and I'm not taking credit for it, but any coach, without coaching, and I have coaches, without coaching, the brain is so strong because it hurts to be stretched and to become responsible and to become a powerful creator, one with whatever that force is that created this universe. And that I'm creating my experience. So that means I can create anything I want. Perhaps I'll start with the end in mind and start acting like the person that's achieved these things now. And I'll get out of the story. So, like going to the physical gym, the brain reacts all the time to you trying to stretch it and take accountability for everything that happens in your life. And it will want you to stop. It'll tell you, you don't need this coaching. You don't need this work. Now, I have clients that have been with me for 20 years, 23 years, 15 years, 10 years, and they've all achieved something they never thought was possible. And it went far beyond what they imagined. They're far beyond what they imagined for themselves in life. And what they did was continue to challenge that mind with some help and to claim their power as a creator of their life. So it's managing what I call their self-talk. And they learn to run the mind. Now, can they run it 100% of the time? I haven't found that yet. And I've been doing this work since 1998. That's 26 years if you can do the math. If you can't, don't tell me a story about your math teacher was an idiot. So with help, and I have a coach, and I notice my acorn brain working every day to try to enroll me in something, especially after I moved to New York City. The first few years, I wouldn't give an inch when people were trying to squeeze over at the last minute, which happens a lot, right? Instead of merging in at a reasonable time, it happens every day in New York City, people squeezing over at the last second. And what I noticed is that not giving an inch was also something I was creating elsewhere in my life. So here I am inching forward to make sure somebody doesn't get in front of me. And I was bringing that everywhere. Where else? I had a coach, he said, where else are you doing that, Lentini? And so when I realized it, to create space in traffic and relax, let people in. Now I have people mad at me in New York City for letting a bunch of people in. I'm giving space. And I noticed that I'm giving more space and more grace for others, that it also occurred in the rest of my life. I write about that in my upcoming book called In Plain Sight. The subtitle is Learn to See What Most People Miss and Embrace Life as It Is. Life is a friend. The universe is a friendly place. And when we get to that place, we're grateful. We find the gift in everything. Don't take my word for it. Prove it to yourself. Take 2 or 3 breaks during the day or more where you think about what you're grateful for. And when you notice you're a little bothered by someone or something, look at why. What is the gift in this? What's it here to teach me? Paul in the gospel said that essentially, I'm going to give you the Cliff Notes, the shorter version, that Christ said or was teaching that everything works together for our good. Muhammad said what reaches you was never meant to miss you, and what misses you was never meant to reach you. So that helps me as I think about everything works together for my good, and that what reaches me was never meant to miss me, to be with whatever shows up and enjoy it. It may be a challenge, but I know there's lots of possibilities, infinite possibilities. And as a leader, that's a fascinating mindset to get yourself into. Now, like I said, I'm not 100% there. You might get 60 or 70% of the way training your mind if you invest in coaching or go to the Neuro-gym, develop your own practice. Some quiet time, some walks in nature, whatever you love, whatever takes you away out of your mind. Might be painting or writing or playing an instrument, but spend some time doing that alone time, that quiet time, sitting by the beach, maybe if you love the ocean. It's called a pattern interrupt. It gets you out of your head. It could be meditation. Some people have a challenge with meditation. Deepak Chopra said you can ask yourself while you're meditating, what shall I think of next? Ask your brain that, right? Just in your mind. I don't suggest you do it in the middle of the shopping mall. What shall I think of next? You'll notice there is a gap. It's fascinating when I tried it. There's a gap. And Deepak said you can expand that gap. Now, he said he's gotten to 4 and 6 and 8 hours of expanding that gap. I'm lucky if I've gotten to 7 minutes. I'm still working on that. We're all humans. That's the other thing, is to have a sense of humor about yourself. When you look back on your life and you realize you created whatever it is that your brain reminds you of that was humiliating or embarrassing or even a big failure or mistake, your brain will remind you of it. See, the brain has an advantage. It remembers all those times that you fell down. So what? Tell yourself it seemed like a good idea at the time and have a chuckle and know you created it. You don't have to know how. As you begin to practice that, how did I create this? What's the gift in this? What was there to teach me? Perhaps you reflect and go back and say, wow, if that hadn't happened, then this wouldn't have happened. Then that wouldn't have happened. And then this wouldn't have happened. You'd see the string of maybe a staircase that brought you to the place you are now. I don't know. You have to tell me. Or you have to tell yourself. And you'll discover that you have a power to create the life that you've only imagined up until now. That's the fun part. Life becomes more exciting when you start planning on what you want to create. You're the creator. So make it big. And be expansive and open-minded with your people. If you're a leader, it's especially important because you're modeling what they will follow. You know that your kids will tell you that, let's say that you've told them something a lot about what they should be doing. And then when they catch you doing it, it's fascinating how many kids will say, Dad, Mom, don't you say not to do that? You're doing it. They watch us. And that's a human trait. Our employees watch us. Our sales teams watch us. And so if you start modeling limitless thinking instead of small-minded thinking, and remind your people that they live in a miracle. We live in a miracle. We don't even know what this whole thing is about. By the way, physicists have said this marble is probably bigger than what we are in relation to the size of the universe. We might just be the size of a grain of sand. our hubris, our ego has us thinking, we're all it here. As Einstein said, there's a superior reasoning power that created this unimaginable universe, and that forms my idea of God, when he was asked about his idea of God. He also answered another way he would say this: read the God of Spinoza, Baruch Spinoza, who later became Benedict Spinoza. You can Google either one. It's fascinating what he wrote in the 1600s. What I'm asking you to do is make your life an experiment and change from woe is me to I am the creator, and begin consciously, proactively picturing what you want, seeing it in your mind, by the way. Don't worry about how, see it, and then work backwards from there and act as if you are that person now. Now, for the sales portion of this, salespeople need some help. Now, your top producers probably don't. Albeit, I think everybody has a level to go above where they are. So here's the thing that holds salespeople back. Here are the habits of top producers. Top producers manage their self-talk. They manage this mind. Even if they're not consciously calling it managing their mind or running the machine or going to the Neuro-gym, they have healthy habits about how they talk to themselves. If they have a setback, they look at it as to how they created it. What can they learn from it? What can they do differently? And they move on. Much like a child who learned how to walk. I don't know. Did you learn how to walk without ever falling? No, that's what this whole life is. This whole life is for us to get up, try something, fall. Get up, try something, fall. Get up, try something, fall. And we advance, hopefully, with every fall. We learn something. So number one is top producers in sales manage their self-talk. If you have salespeople that are not producing, perhaps they've gotten into a rut in their mind. That's where coaching helps them with training. That's why I joined Southwestern Consulting last year. I added their certification to my work because they have great training modules. One of the senior partners, Dave Brown, wrote the book Servant Selling, and there's a whole training program based on his book. And Ron Alford has a book. He's one of the other senior partners about possibility and how to stretch, keep stretching. So there's a lot of like-minded people. Their other part of their creed, part of what we all follow, is to give the world valuable information for free. And I've been doing that for 26 years, for as long as I've been coaching people, is helping people win. Helping people win. So salespeople that are stuck, one, their self-talk is poor. Two, they need help managing their behavior. So when I noticed salespeople, when I was managing sales teams that were stuck for 6 months or a year, and sometimes when I took a new position with a company, I would find people that were stuck in the middle for 2 or 3 or 4 years that were flat. And I'd bring them in and say, let's go back to 4 years ago. Let's go back to 3 years ago, where you had many years going back 3 years and beyond. Further back, you had successive years of good sales growth. Tell me what you were doing then. I would help them adjust their behavior and ask, where are you not doing that now? Where has that fallen off? And then perhaps if what they were doing back then wasn't working, maybe they were still doing it. Marshall Goldsmith wrote the book, What Got You Here Won't Get You There, is that we have to continue to change. And maybe they needed to change. And so we figured out some new things they could do that would get them back on track. Because if they had been successful, they have the tools and the skills. So that's a place that I help them with. The other thing I found out was in working with people is they would get stuck in their story. They would have a dialogue with themselves about how the company wasn't working, and they'd also share it with cliques of other salespeople. It was fascinating. Birds of a feather flock together. So the ones that were struggling would all have a tale of how the company wasn't working, yet they wouldn't go to the company and suggest things. It's not that they were cowardly, it's human to want to have the story. That's how powerful it is. That brain wants you to have someone else at fault, some other reason. After all, you're not the creator. You need to live in woe is me. So when I got them to tell me their complaints about the company, and I'd ask them, well, have you taken it to the warehouse manager? Have you taken it to the customer service manager? Have you taken it to the owners? I did work in one company where there was a group of top people that seemed like they wanted to run the company. They were subverting everything the owners tried to do. In fact, they had people on the administrative team of the owners that would go back to the top salespeople and say, hey, they're talking about this. They're going to do this. And then the salespeople with that tip would go and circumvent it. The owners would be surprised and shocked because, first of all, they discovered they had people on their administrative staff that was supposed to be helping them win, going back to the sales team. It was like the sales team had become the owners. Sad story is fast forward 3.5 years, that company went out of business. Now, the word was it was acquired, but I can tell you it was acquired at a big loss to the owners. People love to have that water cooler talk. I don't know if there's water coolers left anymore. I think so. But they love to have that talk in the lunchroom. They love to have their little cliques, and people love the woe is me story because it's more comfortable to have someone to blame. So salespeople have to have the courage to speak up. If you have a complaint, have a suggestion to go with it. I call it a complaint with a request. Go somewhere with it. Now, even if your solution isn't used, if your suggestion isn't used, a dialogue gets the company thinking about it. It may be a problem. And if enough people speak up about it, instead of talking amongst themselves, they're talking amongst themselves, right? A complaint not taken to someone who can do something about it is like picking up dog do, I guess, on your grass or your neighbor's grass or on your grass and bringing it to your neighbor. Hey, I picked my dog do up. That's what complaining is. It's energy draining. Yes, you can find people that'll go, oh yeah, it does suck. You're right. The warehouse is terrible. Customer service is terrible. Shipping is terrible. R&D is terrible. The software all has flaws. Doesn't anybody see? It saps the energy out of people. Now, when you take it to someone who can do something about it, it's courageous. It's courageous. You have to have some courage. You're actually helping the company, especially if you've thought about it enough to have a suggestion. What I call a request, a complaint with a request. You can call it anything you want, a complaint with a suggestion. How about just a suggestion? Catch it before it becomes a complaint and go right away. Hey, I got an idea. Here's what I've noticed. So salespeople manage their self-talk, look at what worked when it isn't working, and challenge yourself to come up with new ways and not worry about failing. Keep trying new things. especially when things aren't working. The other thing that with salespeople is, and this is leaders can help them with this, but let's start with salespeople. Often they don't call high enough and they don't think big. So, how can you tell what their thinking is like? Well, if it's not working, by the way, if their results aren't there, number one, their thinking is in question. Number two, their behavior is in question. What are they spending their time on? Number three, your customer book tells a story. So I tell all salespeople, go to your team and ask them, who are our best customers? They have the lowest cost to serve. They're highly profitable. They love us. They work with us, even when there's mistakes and errors, because we make everything right. Who are our best customers? Who's next cut? The next cut of customers. They're not exactly perfect when it comes to the cost to serve, but they're good customers. Then who are customers? And all companies have them that have a high cost to serve, and they really don't respect us. It's fascinating how many companies a few years ago were talking about fire that customer. You know what I say? Qualify the customer and train them. Perhaps if you said, after talking, having a dialogue with a client, because you knew what were the traits of your healthy customers, the lowest cost to serve, then the next level, they weren't necessarily the best customers, but they're good customers. You created questions that would help you qualify. Very good customers, and also to discover customers that fall into the traits of those that you don't want any more of. They had the highest cost to serve. They weren't doing the company any good. They weren't adding to the health of the company. Why would you take them on to begin with? So, what happens in a dialogue like that, when you're asking questions, you uncover things that would make them not very good customer, not a candidate. And then the salesperson would say, well, from what I'm hearing so far, I'm not sure that we're a fit for you. You take it on yourself. You wouldn't say, I don't think you're a fit for us. I don't think we're a fit for you. Because most customers would say, well, why? What is it that we need to do? Number one, that's a closing sign they're interested in you. Number two, you can train them. Here's what concerns me that would make it difficult for us to serve you in the best way. And then whatever it is, payment terms, order size, number of special requests if it's software, for example, time window for shipments, things like that. And then they'd say, well, we can do that, maybe. And they might say, okay, well, our current company is handling all that for us. Yeah, they're putting up with them. Leave them there, right? And that's leadership can help you with it, but salespeople have a responsibility. Go to your company and say, who's our best customers? They have the lowest cost to serve. They're highly profitable. They love us. We work with them. When we make a mistake, we make it right. Of course, that's the philosophy to have with every mistake and every customer. But these people appreciate us. Every company has them. Then that next level, but the salesperson could do it. Stimulate that conversation if your leadership isn't. It's different thinking. It's expanded thinking. So then when it comes to behavior, they understand how to ask for referrals or even join a networking group. They're spending time investing in expanding who they know. Now, a great source of referrals are people who call on your target market and don't compete with you. Your customers have multiple suppliers. I can't picture anyone, at least right now, in my mind, that wouldn't have multiple suppliers doing different things that don't compete with you, and find 3 or 4 people that you can all cross refer. When a customer mentions, we've got some problems in the server room and we really need a service company, the one we're using isn't so good. Yeah, I've got an IT company that they're really good and I've worked with them. Now, when you research people who call on your target market and don't compete with you, you have a lunch with them. You get to know them a little bit, ask them about their company, and maybe you do some research ahead of time. Maybe you ask some of your customers, have you ever heard of XYZ company? Oh, yeah, we do business with them. How are they? They're great. Who's your salesperson? You invite that salesperson to lunch. Now, what you're looking for is when you go to lunch, you say, I want to figure out how I can help you. You're a giver at that point. If they don't answer back in the lunch, all right, now that's great. Thank you for this. How do I help you? What are you looking for? What are your ideal clients? Then if they don't ask you that, they're a taker, not a giver. And that's another tip for salespeople is, are you a giver or a taker? Givers give a little bit everywhere. A little money to their favorite causes, a little money to someone down on their luck. It might just buy someone a sandwich. Instead of saying, get a job, buddy. I know the 12-step programs always say, there but by the grace of God go I. Be a giver. Give some help to people. Have that attitude when you go meet with new customers. Deepak Chopra said, you can wish people happiness, joy, and success silently when you're in front of them. It's an energy they pick up on. And stop worrying about what you're going to get in life. Get out there and give it. Because what you're getting, if you live in scarcity or lack, if you believe that you're going to have to someday forage for your next meal, you might create that. Because it's what you think about. There's plenty in the universe. Let me demonstrate it with this question. How many people in your market, target market, do you serve? 100%? Do you have 100% of the customers? Do you have 90% of the customers? 80%? 70%? 60%? 50%? Most people I talk to say, Steve, I'm not sure we even have 10%. I've talked to people that said, I don't know, we probably only have 2%. Now, there are people out there that have 40, 50, 60% of the available market. Great. You don't have 100. There's still people out there to be knocking on doors. So salespeople also have to work on expanding their thinking. Get over gossiping. Instead, become a productive, healthy contributor to the company. Look at the story you tell yourself everywhere. Start to look at the BS you tell yourself. If it goes back to your parents, if you're still telling the story of a parent that did something to you, you're stuck. You're stuck. If you're telling the story of a boss who did something to you, you're stuck. You're believing your limited thinking. That's the other thinking to get into is what's the gift in this? And that life is a friend. What is this here to teach me? How can I learn and grow? What can I change about myself using this experience as a gift, especially the ones that are very confronting and very hurtful? You feel hurt. What if there was nothing personal in the universe? What if it was only what you made personal? You made it personal. What if you're walking around with a grudge against somebody for years? You're giving that person rent-free space and wasting energy. When you free up those things from your mind, you now have more space to do something creative because you're expanding into limitless possibilities. Very important for top producers. Top producers also invest in coaching and training and reading. They're students of the game. They don't stop learning. I listen to a book every week when I go to the gym, and I read many books that I share with my clients. I probably read, it would scare me, but I probably read 60 or 70 books a year and listen to another 30 or 40 because some are more than a week's worth of listening. If I go to the gym for a couple hours or when I'm traveling on the road, I'm listening. Now, that's my job, right? I'm teaching people and training people and coaching people. So I'm continuing to learn. Well, when was the last time you read a book? And not just about selling. How about self awareness? How about emotional quotient? How about triggers or getting to yes with yourself with William Ury? Or what got you there won't, what got you there won't, what got you here won't get you there by Marshall Goldsmith. He also wrote a book called Triggers, Marshall Goldsmith. They're fascinating books. Sri Kumar Rao, Are You Ready to Succeed? Dr. Roland Alexander, Wise Mind, Open Mind. Dr. James Doty, Mind Magic. Keep stretching. Keep learning. Be students of the game and be willing to invest in a coach who will challenge you because whatever level you're at, you can go further. The only one limiting you is you. I'll tell you a quick story before we close. I had someone call me over 20 years ago and say to me, I want to fire this person, Steve. So talk to them and tell me if I should fire them. I said, no, I don't do that. What? No, I don't do that. I help people win. You make the decision. Fire them. Or if you decide to keep them, I'm glad to train them and coach them. The next day, he called me and said, all right, I want you to coach them. Okay, great. That person went on to become salesperson of the year for that company, changed jobs a few years later. That person was salesperson of the year 2 years in a row, changed jobs and became salesperson of the year, and then eventually a sales leader, and has accomplished things far beyond what they imagined. What they started with was, because I had them do what I talked about earlier, is tell me all what's going on in your life. And I could hear the complaints and the names and the theys. And I said, now rewrite that, write it down for me and read it. And they wrote it down and then they read it. And I said, now change all the names and all the places you had theys and things that happened to you and change it to I. And a third of the way through, this person said, I get it. It's me. I'm creating this. I have a role in it. Yeah. Okay, good. You qualify. Now, I have a self-awareness course on Talent LMS. If you'd like to email me, I'm glad to give you a discount coupon for 50% off for self-awareness. Again, students of the game are not just learning about selling. I'm not here to sell anybody anything. I mean, after all, I wrote the book, Helping People Buy. Helping people buy. That's the methodology that works today. Like Dave Brown's Servant Selling. You can go on Amazon and find the books. Dave Brown, Servant Selling, Steve Lentini, Helping People Buy, No BS Coaching. I have other books there. I'm not here to sell anything. I want to help people win. My passion and purpose in life is to raise the consciousness of humanity one person at a time, and to raise the consciousness of companies one CEO at a time. It's amazing what happens when people change their thinking from small-minded and limited to limitless, because we live in a miracle called a universe. I wish you all great success. Thank you very much. I'm grateful.